Latest developments in Burundi. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Francis. What do you make of this latest move by Burundi to shut the UN Rights Office in the country?
I think the country, Burundi, seems to be soaked in what we call the patrimonial politics. Patrimonial politics because it seems that it is a game of one individual. In fact, when Burundi decided to pull out of the ICC, that seemed to have been a preparation of what is now going on. We are talking about a country that has lost more than 1,200 people to violence that is politically instigated. We are talking about more than 450 people, 450,000 people who have actually disappeared, or rather gone into, fled into neighboring countries. And so it is very unfortunate because they decided to pull out of ICC, but we still have mechanisms that can address that, because institutions, judiciary and legal institutions in that country are like broken because they're not functioning. So people cannot get recourse, unfortunately.
Let's talk a bit about internationally. I mean, Burundi has repeatedly called on the West especially to keep out of its affairs. Do you think the international community has overstepped the mark a little bit in this?
I don't think the international community is on the case of Burundi, or it's overstepping. For two reasons. The first reason is, why would the country pull out of or decide the leaders in the region? But more importantly, on the international scene, it's been very, retrogressive in terms of, collaborating with the international community to address some of the challenges that the country is facing. So in such circumstance, we may not put blame to the international community, but I think what is happening is a country that is trying to isolate itself from the international community for simple reason that they can be able to do their own political expediency. Yeah.
I was going to mention that. It does look like the country is trying to isolate itself. It's obviously, it's not just the UNHCR. You've mentioned the ICC that it pulled out of. What else? We've got the East African Community Summit. It boycotted that. It does seem like the country is isolating itself. What impact do you think this is going to have?
It's unfortunate that the country will continue to experience, a humanitarian catastrophe. But the people, the population in Burundi may not have a recourse. Why? Because it's already cut itself from the international, platform. So even in circumstances where human rights violations have been done and they have reached a threshold where the UN can investigate, they may not have cooperation from the authorities. They may not even be allowed because it's already pulled out of the UN. But I think because this is a mix of things, politics, the country is one of the poorest in the world. So we may see a humanitarian challenge, really, people dying, and maybe what the international community need to do is perhaps to use the United Nations Security Council, maybe to put sanction on some of the activities or individuals who are actually culprits of this violation, human rights violation in Burundi. Otherwise, I think we may see a catastrophe if this is not controlled.
Well, as you just mentioned there, the country is a very poor country, and of course it's heavily dependent on donor funding. So how do you think this is going to affect aid and the flow of foreign direct investment in the country?
Yeah, yes. The challenge is because we are obviously the leaders who are ruling, the president and his lieutenants are going to survive. They will survive. The challenge is the entire population. How are people going to survive in an environment that is isolated, in a politically very instigated country? But I think obviously donors are going to pull out. Some of them have already pulled out. But it's not just enough to pull out. I think we need a consolidated, a global consolidation of ideas and solutions to the problem in Burundi. Where possible, I earlier on suggested that maybe we need a resolution that is going to not just sanction of the leaders who are perpetrating this, but also to find a way of, transitioning the country into elections with some kind of a care, government, so that the people can have a recourse, the people can feel protected and safe. But as we talk, I think the population, the people of Burundi, they feel like they don't belong and their life is threatened. Both their human life, human security, but also their political space. There are no space for expressing themselves because the president decided to lock all the human rights and other organizations that can allow people to express their, their grievances and so on and so forth. And the government institutions, for example, the judiciary, is actually being manipulated by the state. So in such a case, people can't find a solution domestically. They need to find a solution within the region. East African community need to come out very strongly. The challenge would be how to address this, especially in circumstances where, we don't have a mechanism of, addressing that within the EAC community. But the international community has an opportunity, especially within the UN Security Council, to put some sanctions, but also to provide some way, out of this challenge.
Okay, well, let's hope we can. Thank you very much. That was Dr. Francis Onditi there, an expert in international affairs based here in Nairobi. Thank you very much for your insight. Moving on to other news now. Tunisia's ministries of Interior and Defence are still concerned about possible terror attacks and have therefore extended the country's state of emergency. Lawmakers are divided. Some say the state of emergency is the only solution to imminent threats, while others believe it sends a negative message to the world that Tunisia remains an unsafe destination. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi tells us more.
Following a meeting of the High Security Council at Carthage Palace, the President has extended the state of emergency. The Interior Minister says the security situation has improved, but the threat of an attack persists.
Intelligence services have received information on several planned assaults. We have foiled many plots and have taken the necessary measures to prevent attacks or any security breaches. We are ready to react anywhere and at any time to protect Tunisians.
Many MPs have approved the extension. The state of emergency was implemented in 2015 after attacks in Tunis and the coastal city of Sousse.
According to the Ministers of Interior and Defense, the threat is serious, especially in the western parts of the country, as well as dormant cells in the cities and from extremist groups along the Libyan border.
Opposition parties have voiced concern about national security. However, at least 20 MPs have rejected the president's decision, calling it unconstitutional.
It is important to regulate the state of emergency through new legislation. This will have negative impact on investment and tourism. It was implemented in 1978, so it no longer applies to the current situation. It's unconstitutional as it limits individual freedoms.
The Minister of Defense says intelligence over the past 14 months confirms the presence of extremist elements along the Libyan border. Has added that the military is on high alert to prevent any infiltration into Tunisian territory.
Over the past 11 months, the army has carried out nearly 1,000 operations across the country. 35,000 soldiers have taken part in the security campaign conducted along the border regions with Algeria and Libya. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
And now to the latest on the Global Terrorism Index. The report shows that terror activities in 5 African countries rose sharply in 2017. In Nigeria, though, deaths attributed to Boko Haram fell in 2017. That's according to the index. Nigeria has recently vowed to intensify the war on Boko Haram. We spoke to Seyi Editeo, a security consultant, about this.
The report actually tried to, picture the difference between the attacks as recorded in year 2016 and 2017 in terms of analysis of nature and types of attack and the frequency. And the reports try to explain that the reduction is about 27% globally. Well, my own perception is as much as some parts of the world are currently witnessing decrease, there are other parts of the world that are actually experiencing significant increase in terrorism and terror acts. I think this is largely due to the effects of the attack or effects of the actions against ISIS, the decapitation of ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and which have seen mass exodus of some of the fighters into places like North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. The period also shows that there's a significant increase in attacks in Egypt and Somalia, and that is something that that can easily be explained because the push out of ISIL or the decapitation of ISIL in those areas had allowed increase in activities of other terrorist organizations that have been able to receive many of these fighters, resources and equipment within their fold.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including UN consultations on ending harmful cultural norms kick off. And Libya to hold referendum on constitution next year.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Libya's Electoral Commission says the country will hold a referendum on a new constitution next year. The announcement by the chairperson, Imad al-Sayeh, signals Libya's first concrete step toward restoring unity and political stability. It followed last month's adoption by a parliament in eastern Libya of an election law that would govern the referendum and future votes. A 60-member panel drafted the constitution and submitted it to Parliament in August. Al-Sayeh warned that the referendum could be delayed if the Election Commission did not receive security guarantees and funds.
Our executive strategy regarding this process is divided into 2 sections. The first section concerns preparations, while the second involves implementation. We expect to begin this process during the first half of January, running until the end of February. The referendum is thus expected to take place at the end of February. We ask all the parties, all the political groups, all the individuals, all the government officials and all the members of civil society to fulfill their responsibilities regarding this process.
On to Kenya now, and as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime workshop for youth draws to a close, CGTN's Robert Nagila held a discussion on various issues on corruption in Kenya with a group of young people at the UNEP headquarters in Nairobi.
First of all, thank you so much for taking part in this panel discussion. I want to start with you, Leanne. Why is this workshop so important as far as youth participation is concerned?
It draws youth from all over the country, from different counties. Therefore, we get to get a different perspective and experiences from individuals, not just what the media presents or what, just the cherry-picking news. The interaction and the platform to engage and to know that there's a wider network of similar-minded youth.
Austin, let me throw this out to you. Do you feel when it comes to the fight against corruption, the youth are completely left out, and why?
The government top officials are like engaging themselves. They are engaging among themselves, leaving the youths outside. So as a change maker and a voice of the youth, I want to see a society whereby they are creating awareness, especially for me. I want to create awareness, tell the youth the effects and what causes corruption.
How do we change that? Are you saying that perhaps we need to see more youth running for elective office? Are you saying that we need to see more youth take part in affirmative action?
I think it's time for the youth to actually realize that we are being given a platform to step up, and we are being given a platform to speak what we want, because as entrepreneurs, as employees, we want to be making a sustainable economy for our generations to come.
When it comes to corruption, where do you think the problem is as far as Kenya is concerned?
I think the problem is on the judiciary, because the judiciary keeps on, like, the cases take too long to proceed. Then you find that holders of public offices, whenever they are implicated on matters of corruption, they are released on bail or bond, then they go back to their offices instead of stepping aside until you are cleared of all the allegations.
Corruption is a subject. We just use it as a blanket term, but no one goes into details as to what does corruption constitute, why is the corruption there, and who are the key players that we need to be engaging, aside from the youth, because we are the leaders of today, not tomorrow. Tomorrow is already here.
What is it that you're fighting for, you're aiming to fight for as far as corruption is concerned?
I want to see a generation whereby everyone will be culpable, will be like taking responsibility of what they are, of who they are and what they have.
If we get to a point where we actually respect someone else's opinion, we respect property, we respect the laws, the policy. When we get there, I think that will be the greatest joy.
We also need the officials that we've elected. We need people in the industry movers and shakers to create that platform, to take on mentorship programs, internships, apprenticeships, and create that opportunity.
So in essence, what I'm getting from this discussion, you would like to be heard more, you would like to be more involved in matters of national importance, but more importantly, the media has a role to play when it comes to civic education. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for your input and for your time as well. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi.
Experts in Nigeria have called for appropriate utilization of social media in the run-up to the country's elections. Key players in the communications and technology sector have come together to discuss the power and reach of social media as a campaign tool for the polls.
Nigeria is said to have over 50 million active social media users across various platforms. Though plagued with issues around misinformation and fake news, stakeholders are convinced online platforms can help develop the country if properly utilized.
Social media can also be a nuisance to the government and society at large. Mudslinging, hate speeches, cyberbullying, rants and unbridled ventilation of anger are common features on many of these platforms.
With Nigeria's general election fast approaching, politicians are also using social media as a tool to reach and persuade voters. More than 65% of Nigeria's voting population is comprised of young people who are active online.
Personally, I believe the undecided vote is significant enough to still tilt the outcome of the election in either direction among the two top players. So what it means is, of course, we should expect a lot of engagement on social media in the next couple of months. And then the jury is out on what it will do eventually, but definitely the impact will be significant.
It is expected that a lot of interactions will take place on social media as aspirants aim to acquire more support. And it is hoped that a signed peace agreement by vying candidates will keep the electioneering period safe and more secure. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, staying in Nigeria, the UN has kicked off a series of regional consultations with traditional and religious leaders on ending cultural and religious norms harmful to the development of girl children in Africa. The first phase of the consultation started in Nigeria, where an estimated 23 million girls have been married off as child brides. CGTN's Kelechi Emekolum has more.
Religious and traditional leaders from Africa all converged here to put an end to a practice some of their institutions have backed for many years. The conversation here is centered on ending female genital mutilation and child marriage by 2030. The UN estimates up to 14.2 million girls under the age of 18 will be married off every year for the next decade. And sub-Saharan Africa has the highest prevalence of child marriage globally. For instance, countries like Niger, Chad and Central African Republic top the global list of countries with the highest rate of child marriages, a pattern the UN blames for severe underdevelopment in the region.
So what we are calling for here is give women and girls a chance. Give them a chance to contribute to economic development and prosperity. We will never be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals without the full participation of women and children.
For decades, female genital mutilation and early marriage have persisted under the cover of cultural and religious beliefs, yet little effort has been made to engage the guardians of the cultural and religious institutions in Africa.
We think we must execute what everybody is thinking to erase, to stopping the child marriage minus 18. I think that's why we will do together with our local government, with our people, with our community, to understand and to show them how. It's not to say stop, to say why we have to stop.
We as the traditional leaders, we are custodians of culture. So if we are custodians of culture, we must see the good ones only and take the bad ones, throw it away. Because that time, that culture, it works, but not this time.
I was married. The consultations will propose a framework for next year's AU summit with traditional and cultural authorities on ending child marriage and female genital mutilation. Kelechi Emekolum, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
In South Sudan, United Nations staff in the northern town of Bentio have visited patients at the state hospital, distributing gifts and spreading some festive cheer. For their part, volunteers for the South Sudan Red Cross Society have trained 25 girls in first aid response.
Volunteers in South Sudan are hoping to build resilient communities.
Just a smile on the lady's face is enough for us. They are really thankful because they say it's one of a kind. It's never happened in Bentiu where they did not even know about the UN volunteers. So we try to tell them what we are doing. So on my part, as a UN volunteer, I'm proud and excited about this activity.
They've also handed out goodies to patients at a hospital in the northern town of Bentiu.
We have received blankets and mosquito nets. At this time in Bentiu, it's a cool weather, and we are happy to have received these blankets and the mosquito nets, as there is also a lot of mosquitoes in this place.
More than 500 international and local volunteers work in South Sudan, one of the largest volunteer programs in the world.
UN volunteers work on many different fields. They support UN agencies in their work, whether it is humanitarian relief, whether it's development or peacekeeping. They are all everywhere, and they are almost the backbone of all UN operations here, because they represent a very important component of the personnel in different UN organizations.
Young people at a local school have also benefited learning basic first aid skills.
My name is Mary Ago. I'm in Standard 7. I've been training to be a first aid responder. When I grow up, I want to be a volunteer to help my people.
I want to become a volunteer to help other people, and I want to inform those people who did not join to join us, to let them become the first aid to help other people like we.
Volunteers aim to empower communities to survive natural disasters and political instability.
Volunteerism means to me is a panacea to resolve any problem of the society. Without volunteerism, it is impossible to bring peace in the society or reduce all the natural disaster or calamities that we are facing nowadays.
There are more than 1 billion volunteers globally, more than 12 million of them in sub-Saharan Africa alone. However, aid agencies say more locals need to get involved in campaigns to support communities facing development challenges. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
A recap of your top stories now. The High Court in Rwanda's capital, Kigali, has acquitted government critic Diane Rwigara and her mother on charges of inciting insurrection and forgery. The 35-year-old businesswoman was arrested in September 2017. She was the only female who showed interest in the presidential elections held in August 2017. US senators in recent days urged the Rwandan government to drop the charges against her. In response, Rwanda's Justice Minister told reporters that courts should not be pressured by third parties. Burundi has ordered the United Nations Human Rights Council to shut its office in the country within 2 months. That's according to the country's foreign ministry. Last month, Burundi boycotted an East African Community Summit, which was meant to focus on Burundi's ongoing political crisis. In 2017, Burundi left the International Criminal Court after it launched an investigation into the alleged atrocities in the country. A wave of violence started in the country in 2015 when President Pierre Nkurunziza said that he would run for a third term. Libya's Electoral Commission says the country will hold a referendum on a new constitution next year. The announcement by the chairperson Imad al-Sayeh signals Libya's first concrete step toward restoring unity and political stability. It followed last month's adoption by Parliament in eastern Libya of an election law that would govern the referendum and future votes. A 60-member panel drafted the constitution and submitted it to Parliament in August. Al-Sayeh warned that the referendum could be delayed if the Election Commission did not receive security guarantees and funds. The UN has kicked off a series of regional consultations with traditional and religious leaders on ending cultural and religious norms harmful to the development of girl children in Africa. The first phase of the consultation started in Nigeria, where an estimated 23 million girls have been married off as child brides. The consultations will propose a framework for next year's AU summit with traditional and cultural authorities on ending child marriage and female genital mutilation. And those are the top stories that we're covering. Well, let's now go to Rama. He has all the business news for us.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. Ugandan legislators block the activation of the East African passport. And the South African arms maker Denel is no longer up for sale. We'll tell you why shortly. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's start in East Africa, where the move to have an East African Community international passport has been delayed, as Ugandan legislators have blocked it, apparently, arguing over its legality and the cost to end users. Now, in 2016, remember, leaders of the East African Community agreed to upgrade the EAC passport from a regional one to an international document, with Kenya and Tanzania launching it last year. Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi and South Sudan were given until January 2019 to make the upgrade, but Ugandan legislators have queried the loyalty of some states to the community and the laws under which an e-passport was issued. Uganda had launched the passport, which cost an ordinary holder $70. It's up from $40, and that brought about a bit of uncertainty among the leaders. Uganda Central Bank has left its key benchmark lending rate unchanged at 10% in its meeting in December. The bank's governor says that the decision is based entirely on an anticipated rise in domestic economic activity and therefore inflation in the coming fiscal year. CGTN's Michael Beleke filed this report.
The Bank of Uganda governor says strong economic performance in the first 10 months of 2018 indicates that growth could even be better in 2019.
The strong economic growth is in part supported by the accommodative monetary policy stance and the associated rebound in private sector extension.
The latest government data indicates the economy grew between 7 and 8% this year, better than the projected 6%. Economists attribute the growth to improved harvests and stable inflation caused by the resulting lower food prices. Public infrastructure investments, according to Bank of Uganda, are also driving economic activity. But the central bank warns there could be risks to Uganda's strong growth down the road. Some of the risks include unpredictable weather conditions, which could affect agricultural productivity, but also the slow execution of public investment projects largely financed using borrowed money. Some economists worry Uganda and other countries are channeling their limited resources to infrastructure projects that may be slow to generate economic benefits.
Economic transformation, poverty reduction is not simply going to arise by the fact that we have paved roads and have hydropower generating dams.
But the Bank of Uganda maintains that it has assessed the risks and uncertainties, and it says it plans to push ahead with its current monetary policy position. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Negotiations for the sale of South Africa's state-owned arms maker, Denel, to Saudi Arabia are off the table. The company recorded a loss of nearly $144 million in the last fiscal year. That said, Denel's chair claims that the company is strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet. The arms maker has been sinking deeper and deeper into debt. It's in fact relying entirely on government guarantees to the tune of about $245 million. In the 2017-2018 fiscal year, the firm recorded a net loss of $113 million and a 38% fall in revenue. Still in South Africa, the National Assembly over there has decided to amend the constitution to make land expropriation without compensation entirely legal. This marks the next stage in the country's land reform process, as Angela Coppola now explains.
209 members of Parliament have adopted a report compiled by the Constitutional Review Committee, but not everyone's happy with the decision.
It's not surprising, but it's very disappointing, partly because expropriation is simply a red herring. It's not the fact that the government's been paying for land is not the reason that land reform has been slow and has been such an absolute failure, with up to 90% of land reform projects having failed. Speeding it up through expropriation is not going to address those fundamental problems.
It's not clear exactly what changes will be made to the legislation. Political parties have been calling for different amendments.
It's very vague. No one has any idea yet what will be in the final draft. And it ranges from the EFF, which wants all land and much else belonging to the state, to the ANC, which wants the ability to expropriate some properties under very specified conditions without compensation. It's not clear yet, even within the ANC, what's meant by that.
There's already been one unsuccessful legal challenge, and at least another is likely to follow.
The procedures are so obviously defective that there is the scope to bring legal action. The question is when to do it. We're consulting with our lawyers. The question is whether you go now that Parliament has made this decision, or whether there's still a risk that the courts might say, but we don't know what Parliament ultimately is going to decide on the text of a constitutional amendment.
There are two emotive issues at stake here, land and the Constitution, and one is going to have to be amended to affect the other. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The BRICS political parties dialogue does continue in Pretoria, South Africa. That gathering is aimed at addressing political and economic challenges among the 5 member states. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with this report.
Hundreds of delegates from former and current governing parties within BRICS are here. Other fraternal parties from the continent are also represented at this summit. The discussions are centered on how to further develop Brazil, China, India, Russia and South Africa as BRICS member states. Many here shared experiences in the strengths of their respective countries and what makes them unique.
India's biggest strength is its diversity. There is simplicity in every Indian. There is a unity in every corner of India. This is our strength. The foundation of BRICS countries have been laid on the same principles of mutual respect.
The expanded influence and sphere of the BRICS political parties plus has become an important platform to reposition all progressive forces of the world, to renew their bonds, strengthening solidarity, deepening ideological cohesion, and consolidating governments' cooperation on the basis of mutual respect, territorial independence, and sovereignty. BRICS has become the hope of progressive internationalism and solidarity for all of humanity.
We are eyewitnessing developments of a truly historic nature. The unipolar world is rapidly becoming a thing of the past. New forces emerging in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East are increasingly challenging the global domination of the old colonial powers, which are determined to retain control over the world by economic blackmail, information genocide, and military interventions.
South Africa is the current chair of BRICS and will hand over the reins to Brazil. The president-elect will then take up the post in January. The discussions here are expected to continue until Thursday. An agreement on how relations can further be enhanced between these countries is also expected to be reached. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Now, a day after Qatar announced that it was leaving the oil producers cartel, OPEC, Saudi Arabia extended an invitation to its head of states to attend the Gulf Cooperation Council summit this weekend. Now, while the invitation does appear to be a bid to try and ease tension, some experts do believe the strained ties between the Saudi-led Arab Quartet and Qatar will continue. CGTN's Adil Makruhi has the details.
For nearly a year and a half, 4 Arab countries have cut diplomatic ties with Qatar, shutting down land, sea and air borders and freezing all economic relations. All international mediation efforts have failed. Qatar escalated this week, announcing that it will leave OPEC.
Qatar's withdrawal from OPEC complicates the situation even more. It was sudden and justified and was announced from Doha, not from the headquarters in Vienna. It also came just a few days ahead of the OPEC meeting that is discussing decreasing production. It looks like a direct hit to Saudi Arabia, which is the real leader in the organization, and a support to Iran against the sanctions it's facing.
Qatar's oil-rich production represents less than 2% of the organization's. Its decision won't have much impact. Nonetheless, after the announcement, Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz extended an invitation to the Emir of the gas-rich state Tamim bin Hamad to attend the GCC summit this Sunday.
Maybe because of the pressure Saudi Arabia is under for the case of the Khashoggi murder, many expected Saudi to ease up some of its tensions with Qatar. But I think it's only a protocol invitation. There are indications that the crisis will remain as is. One of them is that when the GCC Secretary General submitted King Salman's invitation, Qatar Minister of State met him and not the Emir.
To attend the summit, Qatari officials have hinted that the economic siege must first be lifted.
On the ground, nothing has changed in this diplomatic row against Qatar. Responding to the news about a possible breakthrough, Cairo reaffirmed that Qatar must accept all 13 demands Egypt announced with Saudi Arabia, UAE and Bahrain. So once again, all parties say they're not taking a step back. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And finally, Nigeria's second largest network operator, Airtel, has confirmed plans to establish a payment service bank in order to promote financial inclusion in the country. With a subscriber base of over 40 million customers, Airtel intends to leverage its distribution to drive financial inclusion. That's expected to grant access to financial services to the rural poor, low-income earners and the financially excluded in Nigeria. The wireless carrier has applied for the PSB license through a subsidiary as directed in the Central Bank of Nigeria's guidelines. According to Nigeria's interbank settlement system, the volume of mobile money transactions was estimated at 3.3 billion in the last 9 months. I'll leave you there for the time being, but here's what's coming up at the top of the hour. We'll be looking at the latest coming out of the OPEC meeting in Vienna. Do we have a deal? Do we not have a deal? We'll have answers for you live from Vienna at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. After the break, we meet Mama Rosa, a Chinese national who has become a sensation in Kinshasa for singing in Lingala.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Let's now cross over to the DRC, where a Chinese woman living in the country has shot to fame by singing popular Congolese songs in the local language. Zhang Weishuang came to the DRC 10 years ago on business, but her passion for music was rekindled in Kinshasa and she hasn't looked back. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has her story.
Zhang Weishuang has become a sensation in Kinshasa for singing in Lingala. Locals call her Mama Rosa. Zhang left her hometown in China's ancient city 20 years ago. She's spent a decade in the DRC, where music feeds the soul.
I began learning to sing and to play piano as a teenager. Through my hard work, I got accepted by Shenyang Conservatory of Music and received professional vocal training.
One of her favorite songs is Nakei Nairobi, which means I'm going to Nairobi. Celebrated Congolese musician Mbilia Bell sang it in the mid-80s. When she heard Chung sing, Bell asked the Chinese singer to perform alongside her at a concert in Kinshasa.
Her performance is very charming, and when I prepare Lingala songs, I sing about her first. In her music, Nakei Nairobi, many Africans know that it's very best, and it has great melody and emotions, and it's very similar to Chinese lover songs. That's why I picked this song, Nakei Nairobi.
Yeah, I agree. It has very beautiful melodies. Could you just sing some few lines of Nakei Nairobi?
Oh la la. Okay, just like na yu kin zan be mo tin du yan pa si pa niu ko li yo ya ga ben be ni na sa li se wa yo ya mo te ma. That's okay.
Xu Weishang has won the hearts of many Congolese with her rendition of popular songs like Nakei Nairobi, and she has plans to compose her own Lingala songs one day.
Chung has also appeared alongside other famous Congolese musicians like Wera Son.
It's my first time to hear a Chinese lady singing in Lingala. I am very impressed by Mama Rosa. I request her to keep it up.
And her local fan base is growing.
Mama Rosa is amazing. She sings just like a Congolese who was born and raised here.
I'm astonished. She sings perfectly in my language, and she also interprets it very well.
Although Chung Weishuang's musical journey began in China, it's here in the DRC that she's honed her craft. Chung intends to use her fame to promote more cultural exchange between Congolese and Chinese musicians. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Wonderful. We have all the sport coming up, including South Africa mull possible hosting of the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
We begin with football. The host nation for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations has yet to be decided after Cameroon was stripped of their rights. CAF has approached the South African Football Association to consider staging the tournament, while Morocco could also be in contention. CGTN's CS Duplessis looks at the chances of South Africa hosting another AFCON.
The Department of Sports and Recreation is interested in the idea of hosting the expanded AFCON tournament because South Africa has a proven track record of hosting major events and because the competition will provide jobs and a much-needed cash injection for the beleaguered economy. But it will require CAF to contribute financially.
Because in the manner it is happening, it's not like we went to bid. It is looking for an alternative venue. So definitely we would have to meet each other in some form of way halfway so that we can make that tournament to succeed should we have that opportunity to do so.
Despite the fact that the Rainbow Nation boasts world-class stadia, solid infrastructure and experience, the venue for the tournament could be decided due to a sympathy vote after a large part of the continent voted for the joint World Cup bid from the US instead of their Moroccan counterparts.
But I think with South Africa is that even though everyone in power is saying the right things, I think the only way we'll get the AFCON is if Morocco doesn't want to host it. And because when you look at the power moves that they've made and how they've strategically aligned themselves, the goal was to get this and the World Cup. So I think the only deterrent from Morocco is that they've already lost the World Cup bid, so they don't owe CAF any favours.
A political dilemma awaits the CAF president Ahmed Ahmed. He could well lean on the SAFA president Dr. Danny Jordan for the assistance, as the two enjoy a healthy relationship, while the dealings with Morocco have been difficult and strained, to say the least.
I think for the good of CAF, the AFCON shouldn't go to neither countries. But for the good of the tournament, I mean, it's only those two countries that you could say can host this tournament the following day if needs be. So it's going to be a tricky challenge, because how do you look at the political dynamics, and also how do you go for a place that's going to guarantee you a successful hosting of this tournament?
Despite the fact that CAF might feel for Morocco, the CAF president could be inclined to go with the host nation that guarantees a successful staging of the event, and the fact that he hails from the Kasafa region could well mean that he looks south instead of north to ensure that his first AFCON in charge is a success, regardless of the political backlash. CS2+C, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Still on football, Uganda's Vipers Soccer Club have advanced to the first round of the CAF Champions League. The Uganda League champions beat Sudan's El Merreikh in the preliminary round. The Vipers were coming off a 2-1 first leg defeat and needed a single goal to advance. The hosts, however, could have been on the back foot early on when Rahman Yusuf came close, but he was ruled for offside. The Vipers should have then taken the lead in the first half, but Tito Okello squandered a clear chance at goal. The Ugandan side managed to break the deadlock when Abraham Ndugwa netted the only goal. 2-2 is the aggregate score, but it was the Vipers that advanced on the away goals rule. The Ugandan side will next face Algeria's MS Constantine for a place in the group stages. To Nigeria now, where an annual national sports festival is set to kick off this weekend. 6 popular traditional sports, including wrestling, are expected to attract attention as they make a comeback to the festival. Some of the traditional wrestlers have been practicing in the capital, Abuja, where the festival will be held. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
Traditional wrestlers polishing their skills ahead of the upcoming National Sports Festival. Wrestling and other traditional sports have been left out of previous festivals due to lack of financing. Wrestling in Nigeria dates back thousands of years. It was one way of projecting strength and an initiation path into adulthood for young men. A village with the most prolific wrestlers was seen as the most secure. But besides that, it was a form of entertainment. In some cases, it was used to determine the rightful groom to the toughest takes all rule. But over the years, the purpose and the rules of the sports has evolved, and that has changed the ultimate goal for these wrestlers to a trophy.
The Yorubas call it Ijakadi, and they will tell you it's originated from there, and they will give you all their stories and order. The Hausas will tell you they call it Kokoa, and they will tell you it's from there. And the Igbos, they call it Mba. They will also claim, but for traditional sports federations level, we took cognizance of all the various histories, and then put together, and then the rules that they apply. We were able to harmonize it to have a particular rule.
Traditional wrestling will make the 37 sports disciplines at this year's National Sports Festival. The sport has evolved over the years. Its rules and purpose have changed, but it still enjoys unrivaled popularity.
Once you go to a particular region and you mention the name they know it for in that region, even the newly born, they say, yes, we even want to do it with you. I remember when our head of state, Muhammadu Buhari, GSF, the president of the country, when he came back from his medical trip, and a pressman asked him how strong he is, and he said, "Do you want us to do the traditional, to do wrestling now?"
In a matter of days, the wrestlers will join about 1,000 athletes from other sports disciplines in the National Sports Festival. An event credited not just for keeping alive the competitive spirit of Nigerians, but also preserving a culture nearly every Nigerian can identify with. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Bye for now.